The year was 2387, and Captain Alex Rodriguez had never felt smaller in his life. Standing in the massive crystal chamber of the Galactic Council Station, he watched as Earth's future was decided by beings that looked like they came straight out of a fever dream. 3 years ago, humanity had thought they were alone in the universe. Then the Zephyrians showed up, glowing, floating jellyfish-like creatures that spoke through dancing lights instead of words. Behind them came 11 other species, each stranger than the last. There were the Chitauri, who looked like giant praying mantises but moved with the coordination of a hive mind. The ancient Terrans resembled walking mountains of crystal and stone, speaking so slowly that their sentences took minutes to complete. Today, these aliens were deciding humanity's place in the galaxy. And from what Alex could tell, it wasn't looking good. The species known as humans, announced the lead Zephyrian, its body pulsing with soft blue light, shows remarkable potential for technological advancement. However, their historical records reveal concerning patterns. Dr. Lisa Chun, Earth's lead negotiator, shifted uncomfortably beside Alex. She had spent months preparing for this moment, learning alien customs and studying their languages. But nothing could have prepared her for the weight of judgment in that chamber. The Chitauri representative stepped forward, its forearms clicking together in what passed for their version of speech. A translation device converted the sounds into words that made Alex's stomach drop. In the past century alone, this species has engaged in 2 global conflicts. Their planet still maintains thousands of nuclear weapons. They wage war over resources, territory, and ideology. That's our past. Dr. Chun interjected, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. We've learned from our mistakes. We've had relative peace for decades now. The ancient Terran's response rumbled like distant thunder. When the translation came through, each word felt like a hammer blow. 70 Earth years is but a moment. To us, your species ended a war just before achieving spaceflight. This pattern has repeated across the galaxy. Species that reach the stars while maintaining aggressive tendencies become threats to all. Alex wanted to argue, to defend humanity's right to make their own choices. But he was just a military observer, here to watch Earth's future unfold. And right now, it looked like that future was being decided by beings who saw humans as dangerous. Children playing with fire. The Galactic Accord was older than human civilization. For over 10,000 years, these 12 species had maintained peace across the galaxy through a simple system. New species were welcomed, but with restrictions based on their perceived threat level. The peaceful plant-like verdants had been given full membership immediately. The warrior culture of the Krex had been quarantined to their home system until they proved they could change their ways. Humanity, it seemed, fell somewhere in between. We proposed the Treaty of Restricted Development, the Zephyrian continued, its lights shifting to a formal purple pattern. Humanity will be granted access to faster-than-light travel and basic galactic technologies. They may establish colonies and trade with council species. However, certain limitations must be observed. Dr. Chun leaned forward. What kind of limitations? The list that followed made Alex's blood run cold. Humans could build civilian ships, cargo haulers, passenger vessels, research craft. They could construct space stations for mining and manufacturing. They could even have defensive patrol boats to protect their colonies, but warships, battle cruisers, military space fleets? Absolutely forbidden. Your species may maintain defensive capabilities suitable for policing pirates and small threats, the Chitauri explained. But military vessels capable of threatening other worlds are prohibited. This restriction will remain in place until humanity demonstrates a century of peaceful expansion. A century. Alex thought about his 5-year-old daughter back on Earth. Probably playing in their backyard right now. By the time humanity was allowed to build real military ships, she would be over 100 years old. Dr. Chun's voice was carefully controlled. And if we refuse these terms? The chamber fell silent. When the Terran finally spoke, its words carried the weight of ages. Then humanity remains confined to its solar system. No star travel, no galactic trade. No access to technologies that could solve your world's energy and resource problems. Your species would advance alone, if at all. It wasn't really a choice. Earth's population was nearing 10 billion. Climate change was devastating large parts of the planet. The resources of space and the clean energy technologies of the galactic community could transform human civilization. But accepting meant acknowledging that the galaxy saw humanity as inherently dangerous. The negotiations continued for hours. Earth's delegates managed to secure some concessions: the right to establish 50 colony worlds, access to advanced medical technologies, and trade agreements. That would revolutionize human industry. But the core restriction remained unchanged. Humanity could reach for the stars, but only as merchants and explorers, never as warriors. Alex watched Dr. Chun sign the treaty with a pen that felt heavier than it should. The elegant script of her signature committed humanity to a path they had never chosen for themselves. Around them, alien representatives pulsed with satisfied lights, clicked their approval, and rumbled their ancient wisdom, but Alex noticed something else. As the ceremony concluded and the various species began to mingle, he caught glimpses of their private conversations. The Zephyrians dimmed their lights when they thought no humans were watching. The Shatari's clicking became more rapid and agitated. And the Terrans kept looking at the human delegation with what Alex could only describe as pity. Later, as they prepared to return to Earth, Alex found himself alone with Dr. Chun in the station's observation deck. Through the transparent walls, they could see the Council's patrol ships, sleek vessels that moved like predators through space, bristling with weapons that humanity was forbidden to understand. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Alex asked. Dr. Chun was quiet for a long moment, watching those ships. "I think we made the only choice we could, but Alex. I've been studying these species for 3 years now. You know what I've learned?" "What?" "Every single one of them went through this same process when they joined the Council. Everyone was restricted, limited, kept from building the ships they wanted. But here's the thing. Most of them eventually earned their freedom and became full military partners." "Most of them?" Dr. Chin's reflection in the transparent wall looked troubled. 3 species never did. They accepted the restrictions, followed every rule, became model galactic citizens. And you know where they are now? Their civilizations collapsed within 500 years. Turns out, a species that completely gives up its ability to fight eventually forgets how to defend itself when something truly dangerous comes along. As their transport ship prepared for the journey home, Alex thought about Dr. Chun's words. The galaxy was vast and mostly peaceful, but it wasn't entirely safe. There were pirates in the outer systems, reports of strange signals from beyond the galactic rim, and rumors of things that even the Council feared to discuss openly. Humanity was being asked to join a community that valued peace above all else. But what happened when peace wasn't enough? What happened when something came along that couldn't be negotiated with, reasoned with, or diplomatically resolved? The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks, time enough for the full implications of the treaty to sink in. They were bringing home technologies that would transform human civilization: fusion reactors that could power entire cities, medical scanners that could cure diseases, and terraforming equipment that could turn dead worlds into gardens. But they were also bringing home a message that would echo through human society for generations. The galaxy had looked at humanity's history and decided they couldn't be trusted with real power. They were the new kids in a very old neighborhood, and the adults had decided they needed to be kept on a very short leash. As Earth grew larger in their view screen, Alex wondered if humanity would accept that judgment, or if someday they might decide that the galaxy's opinion mattered less than their own survival. 2 years had passed since the treaty signing, and Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was getting very good at lying. Standing in the pristine control room of Luna Mining Station 7, he watched as another cargo hauler rolled off the assembly line. To any visiting inspector, it looked exactly like what the paperwork claimed: a simple asteroid, mining vessel designed to haul rocks and ice back to Earth. But Jake knew better. Hidden beneath that innocent exterior were armor plates that could stop military-grade weapons, engines powerful enough to outrun anything the Council flew, and a mining laser that could punch holes through battleship hulls. "Another successful day of peaceful mining operations," announced Chief Engineer Tom Bradley over the comm, and Jake could hear the smile in his voice. Tom had become a master at this game, designing ships that looked harmless while packing enough firepower to level a city. The whole thing had started 6 months after they returned from the Council station. Jake had been reassigning naval personnel to civilian roles when he realized something that made his blood boil. The alien technology Earth had received wasn't just limited, it was deliberately outdated. The Council had given humanity fusion reactors from 50 years ago, computers that were decades behind current galactic standards, and ship designs that belonged in a museum. They weren't just being restricted, they were being kept primitive. The discovery had led to a late-night meeting in a bar outside Houston's spaceport. Jake, Tom, and Dr. Elena Vasquez had sat around a table covered in beer bottles and sketched out what would become Project Defiance on cocktail napkins. Elena, who was supposed to be designing peaceful exploration vessels, had already figured out how to disguise military-grade engines as emergency boosters. Tom had been hiding weapon systems inside mining equipment for months. "We're not breaking the treaty," Elena had said that night, her dark eyes flashing with determination. "We're just being creative with our interpretations." The network had grown slowly at first. A trusted shipyard worker here, a sympathetic engineer there. But as word spread through the human space community, they discovered something remarkable. They weren't the only ones who felt betrayed by the Council's restrictions. Across the solar system, from the orbital platforms around Mars to the ice mining operations in the outer planets, humans were quietly building something the galaxy had forbidden them to have. A real military? Jake's personal communicator buzzed, pulling him back to the present. "Morrison here. We need to talk. Private Channel 7. It was Elena's voice, but there was something tight in her tone that made Jake's stomach clench. He made his way to the secure communications room, a shielded chamber that could block even galactic surveillance technology. Elena's face appeared on the screen, transmitted from her laboratory on Europa. Behind her, Jake could see the twisted wreckage of something that definitely wasn't human. "What am I looking at?" Jake asked. "Remember that Council patrol ship that accidentally crashed on Europa last month? The one they said was a total loss and not worth recovering?" Jake nodded. The Council had written off the vessel as completely destroyed, telling human authorities to simply ignore the wreckage. "Well, I decided to ignore their advice and take a look anyway." "Jake, this changes everything." For the next hour, Elena walked him through her analysis of the alien wreckage. What she had discovered was both terrifying and liberating in equal measure. The Council's military technology wasn't the impossibly advanced superscience they pretended it was. In fact, it was only marginally better than what humanity could build with their current knowledge. "Look at this engine design," Elena said, highlighting a twisted piece of metal on her screen. "It's efficient, sure, but it's based on principles we understood 20 years ago, and their weapons? Jake, we've been building more powerful lasers in our mining ships than what these guys have on their actual warships." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. The Council hadn't restricted humanity because they were too dangerous to be trusted with advanced weapons. They had restricted humanity because they were afraid of what humans might build if they really tried. "There's more," Elena continued. "I found something in their computer core before it completely fried. Fleet deployment records, patrol schedules, the works. Jake, they've been mobilizing. Quietly, carefully, but they're definitely preparing for something." "Preparing for what?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, they're scared enough to break their own rules about information sharing. This data shows joint exercises between species that haven't worked together in centuries." After the call ended, Jake sat alone in the communications room, staring at the blank screen. Outside the small porthole, he could see Earth hanging in space like a blue marble, beautiful and fragile and completely unaware of what was happening in the shadows of its civilization, his personal Communicator buzzed again. This time it was Admiral Rebecca Torres, officially the commander of Earth's exploration fleet, but actually the highest-ranking officer in Project Defiance. All senior staff, emergency meeting in 30 minutes, Luna Station 7, conference room beta. We need to talk. The meeting that followed would later be remembered as the moment Project Defiance became something much larger. Torres had received similar intelligence from 3 other sources: a crashed council fighter on Titan, intercepted communications from a supposedly abandoned research station, and reports from human traders who had noticed unusual military movements in council space. Whatever's coming, it's big enough to scare species that have been at peace for thousands of years, Torres said, her weathered face grim in the artificial light of the conference room. The question is, what do we do about it? Tom Bradley leaned forward. We accelerate the timeline. Every shipyard, every mining station, every supposedly civilian facility we've been using for the project. We bring them all online and start building everything we can? That's a massive risk, warned Dr. David Park, their intelligence coordinator. If the Council discovers what we've been doing, we'll be expelled from galactic society, Torres replied. But if we don't prepare for whatever's coming, there might not be a galactic society left to be expelled from. The decision was made that night. Across the solar system, the word went out through carefully encrypted channels. The time for hiding was over. Manufacturing facilities that had been secretly producing military components doubled their output. Civilian ships began openly training in formation flying and tactical maneuvers. Research stations started broadcasting on military frequencies. Jake found himself appointed as coordination officer for the entire network, a job that meant 8-hour days and constant travel between hidden bases throughout the solar system. But as the weeks passed, he began to see something that filled him with fierce pride. Humanity hadn't just been building ships in secret. They had been building a military doctrine that was uniquely their own. While the Council relied on energy shields and beam weapons, human engineers had perfected kinetic projectiles and explosive warheads. While alien ships were designed for long-range engagement, human vessels were built for close combat and rapid maneuvers. Most importantly, while the galactic military had spent centuries maintaining peace, humanity had never forgotten how to fight. The breakthrough came when Elena's team finished reverse engineering the crashed Council ship. Not only had they learned how their technology worked, they had improved on it. Human fusion reactors were now more efficient than Council designs. Human computers processed information faster than alien systems, and human weapons were not just catching up to them, Elena reported during one of their weekly briefings. In some areas, we're surpassing them. But it was Dr. Park who delivered the most disturbing news. His analysis of intercepted Council communications had revealed fragments of something called Devourer signals coming from the galactic rim. Whatever was approaching, it was something that made the combined military might of 12 advanced species nervous enough to quietly prepare for war. They know something's coming, Park said. Something big enough that they're willing to risk everything to stop it? The question is, why haven't they told us? The answer came in the form of another intercepted message, this one from a high-ranking Zephyrian military commander to his fleet captains. The translation was chilling in its casual dismissal of humanity. Priority deployment to Sector 7 continues as planned. Maintain communications blackout with restricted species. If outer defenses fail, implement Protocol 74, full. Evacuation of essential personnel to core worlds. Non-essential species, including recent additions, are considered acceptable losses in defensive calculations. Jake read the message 3 times before the full meaning sank in. Acceptable losses? That's what humanity was to the Council, an expendable buffer between whatever was coming and the species that really mattered. They're planning to abandon us, he said quietly. Torres nodded grimly. If this threat is as serious as it seems, they'll pull back to defend their core worlds and leave humanity to face whatever's coming alone. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Explorer. watching the stars through the massive viewport and trying not to think about the irony of her situation. Officially, she commanded humanity's largest deep space research vessel, a peaceful scientific mission exploring the outer reaches of Council space. The crew wore civilian uniforms, the ship's registration listed it as a mobile laboratory, and every piece of paperwork described their mission as xenobiological research and stellar cartography. Unofficially, the Explorer was humanity's first true battleship, armed with weapons that didn't officially exist and crewed by Earth's most experienced military personnel. And right now, Rebecca was using it to attend what might be the most important council meeting in galactic history. The emergency session had been called after the outer monitoring stations went dark. Not damaged, not destroyed, just gone. One day they were transmitting their regular reports from the galactic rim. The next day there was nothing but empty space where entire research installations used to be. Rebecca adjusted her civilian jacket as she prepared to beam over to the council station. After 3 years of pretending to be a peaceful explorer, the deception felt natural now. But today, she could feel the weight of what she really was, a warship commander, masquerading as a scientist while the galaxy faced its greatest threat in 10,000 years, the council chamber, buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from all 12 species gathered for the emergency session. Rebecca noticed immediately that this wasn't the usual diplomatic crowd. These were military commanders, intelligence officers, and defense ministers. The kind of people who dealt with threats, not treaties. The briefing that followed made Rebecca's blood run cold. The entities we are calling the Devourers first appeared on our long-range sensors 6 months ago, announced Admiral Kethter of the Chitauri Defense Force, his forearms clicking rapidly in agitation. Initial contact attempts were ... unsuccessful. The holographic display showed what remained of the Chitauri's outer colonies. Where once there had been thriving worlds with billions of inhabitants, now there were empty husks of planets, their surfaces stripped bare down to the bedrock. Every trace of organic life, every piece of technology, every artificial structure gone. "They don't just destroy," continued a Zephyrian commander, her lights pulsing with fear. "They consume everything, and then they use what they've taken to build more of themselves." Rebecca watched the tactical displays with a growing sense of dread. The Devourers moved through space like a plague, converting everything in their path into more of their kind. Entire solar systems had been reduced to raw materials for their endless expansion, and they were heading directly toward the heart of Council space. What about communication? Asked the Terran military representative, his ancient voice echoing through the chamber. "Have we attempted to establish dialogue?" The silence that followed was answer enough. When Admiral Kethter finally responded, his voice carried the weight of absolute defeat. "We sent our finest diplomats, our most advanced translation systems, our most peaceful representatives." The Devourers responded by converting them into more Devourers. They don't negotiate. They don't communicate. They simply consume. Rebecca found herself thinking about the secret briefings she had attended back on Earth. Project Defiance had been tracking unusual readings from the galactic rim for months, but they had assumed it was some kind of natural phenomenon. The idea that it was an invasion force had never seriously occurred to them. "What are our defensive capabilities?" she asked, playing her role as the concerned scientist while carefully probing for military intelligence. The Zephyrian commander's lights dimmed to a worried orange. "We are mobilizing the combined defense fleet, 1,200 vessels from all member species, including our most advanced battleships and carrier groups. It will be the largest military force assembled since the formation of the Council." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully, but privately she was running calculations that made her stomach churn. 1,200 ships sounded impressive until you considered the size of the approaching threat. According to the intelligence reports, the Devourer fleet numbered in the tens of thousands and was growing with every system they consumed. The meeting continued for hours, with military commanders sharing tactical data and discussing defensive strategies. But Rebecca noticed something that troubled her deeply. Despite their advanced technology and centuries of military experience, The Council seemed to be approaching this threat with the same bureaucratic mindset that governed their peacetime operations. They talked about establishing defensive perimeters and holding actions. They discussed evacuation protocols and strategic withdrawals. They planned to fight a defensive war against an enemy that had already proven it could consume entire civilizations. During a break in the proceedings, Rebecca found herself in conversation with Dr. Lisa Chun, who had been attending as Earth's diplomatic representative. Lisa had been part of the original treaty negotiations and knew better than most how the Council really viewed humanity. "They're scared," Lisa whispered, keeping her voice low as alien commanders moved past them in the corridor. "I've never seen them like this. The Chitauri haven't been this agitated since their species achieved spaceflight. The Zephyrians are practically straubing with panic. And the Terrans. Rebecca, I've seen those ancient beings face natural disasters. That could destroy entire planets, and they've never looked as worried as they do right now." Rebecca nodded grimly. "What about humanity? Are we included in their defensive plans?" Lisa's expression darkened. "That's what worries me most. I've been trying to get details about how Earth factors into their strategy, but I keep getting vague responses about appropriate resource allocation and prioritized defense initiatives. Rebecca, I think they're planning to write us off." The suspicion was confirmed later that day when Rebecca intercepted a private communication between Chitauri and Zephyrian military commanders. The translation made her hands clench into fists. "Primary defense line will be established at the Kepler Nebula, secondary fallback position at the Vega system. All essential species will be evacuated to core worlds if outer defenses fail. Non-essential populations will provide buffer time for strategic withdrawal. Non-essential populations." Rebecca didn't need a translation guide to know what that meant. She immediately opened a secure channel to Jake Morrison back at Luna Station 7. When his face appeared on her private comm screen, she could see the tension in his eyes. He had been monitoring the same transmissions. "They're going to abandon us," she said without preamble. Jake nodded grimly. "We figured as much. The question is, what do we do about it?" "We stop pretending," Rebecca replied. "How fast can we get? Our ships ready for combat operations? The major vessels are ready now. We've got 15 ships that can pass for battleships, maybe 30 that qualify as heavy cruisers, plus about 200 smaller craft that are basically armed scouts." Rebecca did the math quickly. Against tens of thousands of Devourer ships, it wouldn't be nearly enough. But it would have to do. Start moving them into position. Quietly. But get them ready for immediate deployment. If the Council isn't going to defend Earth, then we'll defend it ourselves. Over the next several days, Rebecca watched the Council's military preparations with growing frustration. Their defensive strategy was entirely reactive, designed to slow down the Devourers rather than stop them. They were planning to trade space for time, falling back from system to system in a fighting retreat that might last decades. Meanwhile, humanity's secret fleet began its own preparations. Ships that had been disguised as mining vessels and cargo haulers shed their false identities and revealed themselves as instruments of war. Crews that had been pretending to be civilian workers dropped their cover and showed their true training as some of the finest military personnel in human history. The breakthrough came when Dr. Elena Vasquez transmitted her analysis of the Devourer, technology they had recovered from a destroyed Council probe. Her findings changed everything Rebecca thought she knew about the enemy. "They're not invincible," Elena reported during a secure briefing. "Their adaptive capabilities are impressive, but they're based on analyzing and countering energy-based weapon systems. The Council has been using the same basic weapon designs for centuries: particle beams, plasma cannons, energy shields. The Devourers have learned to absorb and redirect that kind of attack. What about kinetic weapons?" Rebecca asked. Elena's smile was fierce. "They haven't encountered kinetic weapons in their recorded engagements. No railguns, no missile systems, no explosive warheads. The Council considers those weapons primitive and abandoned them thousands of years ago." Rebecca felt a cold smile cross her face. "Primitive weapons. That's exactly what humanity had been building in secret: railguns, missile launchers, nuclear warheads, and kinetic projectiles that could punch through any shield by sheer brute force. Elena, you're telling me that humanity might be the only species in the galaxy still using weapons that can actually hurt these things? Captain Maria Santos had always known this day would come. Standing on the bridge of the UES horizon, watching the massive shapes moving through Jupiter's asteroid field, she realized that the time for pretending was finally over. The ship around her hummed with barely contained power, fusion reactors that officially didn't exist, weapon systems disguised as mining equipment, and a crew that had been training for this moment for 2 years. The Devourer Vanguard had arrived in the Sol system 12 hours ago, and they weren't wasting any time. Through her tactical display, Maria watched as the machines began systematically harvesting Jupiter's moons. Europa, Io, Ganymede, each one was being stripped down to its core, the raw materials flowing into massive construction ships that turned matter into more devourers. "Captain," called out Lieutenant David Kim from the sensor station, "I'm reading 637 individual contacts. They're building something big out there." Maria nodded grimly. Intelligence. Reports from the outer systems had warned them about this. The Devourers didn't just consume planets, they used the material to construct massive manufacturing facilities that could pump out thousands of new ships in a matter of days. Her communication officer looked up from his station. "Ma'am, we're getting hails from Earth Defense Command. They want to know why we're not following evacuation protocols." Maria almost laughed. Evacuation protocols? As if running away was going to solve anything. The Council's strategy had been clear from the beginning. Fall back, establish defensive perimeters, trade space for time. Let the outer systems burn while they protected the core worlds. But this was humanity's solar system. This was Earth. Mars, the moon colonies where Maria had grown up watching ships launch toward the stars. If the Council wanted to abandon it, that was their choice. But humanity wasn't going anywhere. "Signal all ships," Maria ordered. "Drop the disguises. It's time to show these machines what humans really build." Across the solar system, the transformation began. Ships that had masqueraded as cargo haulers for years suddenly revealed themselves as destroyers bristling with weapons. Mining platforms shed their false exteriors and activated hidden missile batteries. Space stations that had pretended to be research facilities powered up shield generators and charged their railgun arrays. The UES horizon itself underwent the most dramatic change. The bulky mining equipment that had disguised its true nature retracted into hidden compartments, revealing the sleek lines of a ship built for one-purpose war. Along its hull, panels slid away to expose rows of kinetic cannons, missile tubes, and the distinctive barrel of a massive railgun that ran nearly the length of the ship. Maria felt a fierce pride as she watched her crew work. These weren't just soldiers following orders. They were the descendants of a species that had fought its way from caves to the stars, and they were about to remind the galaxy why that mattered. "All weapons online, Captain," reported her tactical officer. "We're reading full combat readiness across the fleet." Through the viewports, Maria could see other human ships moving into formation. The UES Explorer, Admiral Torres' flagship, took point with its massive frame bristling with weapons that shouldn't exist. Behind it came the destroyers and cruisers, each one a testament to human engineering and the refusal to accept limitations. The Devourers noticed the change immediately. The machines that had been methodically stripping Jupiter's moons suddenly turned their attention toward the approaching human fleet. Maria's sensors lit up with targeting solutions as hundreds of enemy vessels began moving to intercept. "They're coming," called out Lieutenant Kim. "Energy signatures are—" "Captain, these readings don't match anything in our database." Maria smiled coldly. "That's because they've never fought anything like us before." Open fire. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment humanity announced itself to the galaxy. The UES Horizon's main railgun fired first, sending a tungsten projectile the size of a telephone pole streaking toward the nearest Devourer ship at 20% the speed of light? The alien vessel's shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, simply didn't register the incoming kinetic round. The projectile punched through the Devourer's hull like it was made of paper, the massive impact sending shockwaves through the machine's entire structure. Secondary explosions rippled along its length as critical systems failed, and within seconds the ship was nothing but expanding debris. "Direct hit," shouted the tactical officer. "Target destroyed." But Maria wasn't watching the kill. She was watching what happened next. The other Devourer ships immediately began changing their formation, adapting to this new threat with machine-like efficiency. Energy readings shifted as they reconfigured their shields, trying to compensate for weapons they had never encountered. "Before they're learning," she said quietly. "Just like the intelligence report said, every shot we take teaches them something new." The human fleet pressed their attack with a ferocity that caught the Devourers completely off guard. Missile barrages tore through enemy formations, while railgun fire punched holes in ships that had shrugged off the Council's best weapons. The Devourer's adaptive technology, so effective against energy-based attacks, struggled to cope with the sheer variety of kinetic weapons humanity had developed, but the machines were learning fast. Within minutes of the first engagement, Maria watched as Devourer shields began deflecting missile impacts and railgun rounds started bouncing off reinforced hulls. The enemy adaptation was happening in real time, each hit teaching them how to defend against the next one. "We need to end this fast," Maria muttered, opening a channel to the rest of the fleet. "All ships, maximum firepower. Don't give them time to adapt." What followed was the most intense 15 minutes of space combat in human history. The UES Horizon and her sister ships threw everything they had at the Devourer vanguard: nuclear warheads, kinetic penetrators, explosive shells, and even experimental weapons that were still in testing phases. The space around Jupiter became a storm of fire and debris as two completely different military doctrines clashed for the first time. In the end, it was humanity's willingness to take losses that made the difference, while the Devourers tried to preserve their ships and adapt to new threats. Human captains drove their vessels into point-blank range and traded shots until one side or the other was destroyed. The UES Defiant rammed a Devourer command ship rather than let it escape with tactical data. The destroyer UES Vengeance held position against impossible odds to protect a damaged cruiser, fighting until its hull cracked open and its crew was lost to vacuum. When the smoke cleared, the Devourer vanguard was gone. But so were 8 human ships and nearly 2,000 crew members. Maria stared at the casualty reports and felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders like a lead. Blanket. Her communication officer spoke up hesitantly. "Captain, we're getting a priority transmission from the Council station. It's Admiral Torres, and she's not alone." The main screen flickered to life, showing Rebecca Torres standing in what was clearly the Council's main briefing room. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives from all 12 galactic species, their expressions ranging from shock to something that might have been respect. "Maria," Rebecca said, her voice carrying across the void between stars, "I think it's time we had that honest conversation with our galactic neighbors." The Zephyrian commander stepped forward, her lights pulsing with patterns Maria had never seen before. When the translation came through, the words carried the weight of a fundamental shift in galactic politics. "Admiral Torres, Captain Santos, commanders of the human fleet. The Council formally requests." "No, the Council formally begs for humanity's assistance in defending our worlds against this threat." Maria felt her jaw drop. After 3 years of restrictions and limitations, after being treated like dangerous children who couldn't be trusted with real weapons, the galaxy was asking for humanity's help. Dr. Lisa Shun appeared on screen next. To Torres, her face showing a mixture of vindication and grim satisfaction. "The Council has agreed to suspend the Treaty of Restricted Development immediately. Humanity is being granted full military partnership and access to all galactic defense resources. In exchange," interrupted Admiral Kethter, "of the Chitauri, Humanity will lead the combined fleet against the Devourer main force. Your weapons, your tactics, your willingness to fight, these are things we have forgotten in our centuries of peace. The ancient Terran representative stepped forward, his crystalline form reflecting the lights of the council chamber. We have been foolish. We saw your capacity for violence as a weakness to be controlled. We did not understand that sometimes violence is the only answer to violence. Maria looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These were soldiers who had trained in secret, built forbidden weapons, and risked everything on the belief that humanity deserved the right to defend itself. Now they were being asked to defend not just Earth, but every world in the galaxy. Admiral Rebecca Torres had commanded ships through storms, asteroid fields, and diplomatic crises, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Standing on the bridge of the UES Explorer, she looked out at the largest military fleet in Galactic history, 15,000 ships from 13 different species, all waiting for her order to begin the most important battle any of them would ever fight. The enemy was waiting for them in the Kepler Nebula, where the main Devourer force had established what their scouts called a processing facility. It was a massive structure the size of a small moon, surrounded by clouds of smaller ships that were systematically converting captured star systems into raw materials. From this facility, the Devourers could build enough ships to overwhelm the entire galaxy within a year. Final fleet status report, Rebecca called out to her bridge crew. All human vessels report ready for combat, announced Commander Jake Morrison from his position at the tactical station. Jake had been promoted to fleet coordinator after the success at Jupiter, and now he was helping to manage the largest space battle in recorded history. Council ships are in supporting positions as planned. Rebecca nodded, studying the tactical display that showed their combined force. The alien ships were impressive Zephyrian vessels that moved like flowing light, Chitauri battle groups that fought with perfect coordination, and the massive Terran dreadnoughts that had protected the galaxy for millennia. But at the center of the formation, leading the charge, were the human ships that everyone had underestimated for so long. Captain Santos, are you ready? Rebecca asked over the fleet communication channel. Maria Santos' voice came back clear and determined from the bridge of the UES horizon. Human fleet standing by, Admiral. We've been ready for this fight our whole lives. The past month had been a whirlwind of preparation and coordination. Human engineers had worked alongside alien technicians to upgrade ships and share technology. The Council had opened their military archives, providing humans with star charts, tactical databases, and intelligence reports that revealed just how desperate their situation really was. The Devourers weren't just an invasion force. They were a galactic extinction event. In the 3 months since they had first appeared, they had consumed over 200 inhabited worlds and converted the populations into more of themselves. Entire species had simply vanished, their civilizations reduced to raw materials for the endless machine expansion, but humans had brought something to this alliance that the Council had forgotten existed, the willingness to take terrible risks for the chance of total victory. All ships, this is Admiral Torres, Rebecca announced over the fleet-wide channel. Today we fight not just for our worlds, but for the right of organic life to exist in this galaxy. The enemy thinks we're just another species to be consumed. Let's show them what happens when they threaten everything we love. The attack began with a coordinated assault that lit up the nebula like a second sun. Council ships opened fire with their traditional energy weapons, sending streams of plasma and particle beams toward the Devourer facility. The enemy responded exactly as predicted, their shields adapting and deflecting the attacks within minutes. Then, the human ships joined the battle, and everything changed. The U's Horizon led the charge, her railguns sending tungsten projectiles through the enemy formation at incredible speeds. Behind her, dozens of human destroyers and cruisers opened fire with weapons the galaxy had considered obsolete: kinetic cannons, missile batteries, and explosive warheads that punched through adapted shields like they weren't even there. Direct hits across the board, reported Jake, his voice tight with concentration as he coordinated targeting data between ships. Enemy adaptation protocols are struggling with the variety of our weapon systems. But the Devourers weren't helpless. As the human fleet pressed their attack, the machines began to respond with devastating effectiveness. Swarms of smaller ships broke off from the main facility, moving to surround and overwhelm the human vessels. Their weapons, originally designed to counter Council technology, were quickly modified to target the unique signatures of human ships. Rebecca watched her tactical display, with growing alarm as casualty reports began streaming in. The used Defiant took a direct hit to her engine section and began venting atmosphere. The destroyer UE's Courage was swarmed by dozens of smaller Devourer ships, her crew fighting desperately as enemy machines cut through her hull. "They're adapting faster than we expected," Jake called out. "The enemy is learning from every engagement." "Then we don't give them time to learn," Rebecca replied grimly. She opened a channel to Captain Santos. "Maria, we need to take out that facility now, whatever it takes." The response came back immediately. "Understood, Admiral. All human ships, this is Captain Santos. We're going to ram that thing." Rebecca felt her heart skip a beat. Ramming attacks were desperate measures, last resort tactics that usually meant certain death for the attacking crews. But as she watched the tactical display, she realized it might be their only chance. The Devourer facility was too well defended for conventional attacks, but a coordinated ramming assault by damaged ships might be able to penetrate its defenses. "This is Commander Tom Bradley on the U's Liberty," came a voice over the communication channel. "Our engines are gone and life support is failing. We volunteer for the first run." "UES Defiant here," called another captain. "We're venting atmosphere. But our fusion core is still stable. We'll follow Liberty in." One by one, human ships that had been crippled in the battle volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to captains and crews saying goodbye to their families, knowing they would never see Earth again. "Admiral," Jake said quietly, "we're reading massive energy buildup from the facility. If those ships can overload their fusion cores at the moment of impact... Rebecca understood immediately. The human ships weren't just planning to ram the facility, they were going to turn themselves into massive bombs. Using their own reactors as weapons of unprecedented power, the attack began with the UES Liberty, her damaged hull screaming through space toward the heart of the Devourer facility. Enemy weapons fire concentrated on the approaching ship, but her captain kept her on course even as her hull began to break apart. At the last moment, just before impact, the ship's fusion core went critical. The explosion was visible from thousands of kilometers away, a brief star that illuminated the entire nebula. The U's Defiant followed seconds later, then the destroyer U's Valor, each ship adding to the growing cascade of destruction that was tearing the facility apart from within. "Quantum cascade detected," Jake announced, his voice filled with amazement. "The explosion is destabilizing the facility's power core. The entire structure is collapsing." Rebecca watched as the massive Devourer facility began to tear itself apart, secondary explosions rippling through its structure as critical systems failed. But more importantly, she saw something else. The Devourer ships throughout the nebula were suddenly moving erratically, their coordination breaking down as the facility's control signals were cut off. "All ships, concentrate fire on the scattered enemy vessels," she ordered. "Don't let them regroup." What followed was less a battle than a systematic destruction of an enemy that had suddenly lost its greatest advantage. Without the central facility coordinating their adaptive responses, the Devourer ships found themselves facing weapons they couldn't counter and tactics they couldn't predict. The tide of battle turned in a matter of hours. Ships that had shrugged off the galaxy's most powerful weapons found themselves vulnerable to human kinetic rounds and explosive charges. The machine's ability to adapt was useless when they couldn't communicate with each other or coordinate their responses. When the last Devourer ship was destroyed, an eerie silence fell over the fleet. Rebecca looked around her bridge at the faces of her surviving crew, seeing the same mixture of exhaustion and disbelief that she felt herself. "Fleet status report," she called out quietly. The numbers were sobering. Nearly 3,000 ships had been lost, including 1,200 human vessels. Entire crews had sacrificed themselves to make victory possible, but they had won. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced was gone. Jake looked up from his station, his face reflecting the cost of their victory. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. The Devourer fleets in other sectors have gone dormant. Whatever we did here, it affected their entire network." Over the following days, as the combined fleet limped back toward Council space, Rebecca found herself at the center of a galactic transformation. The species that had once viewed humanity as dangerous, children now looked at them with a mixture of respect and something approaching awe. Dr. Lisa Chun, coordinating the diplomatic aftermath from her position on the Council station, transmitted regular updates about the new treaties being negotiated. The restrictions on human military development weren't just lifted, they were completely reversed. Humanity was being invited to establish military bases throughout Council space, to train alien crews in human tactics and to lead the galaxy's defensive forces.